one republic, one Jamaica. The time by the MLCA is
1 minute after 1.
The people's champion. Our mission is love. Our vision is love. Jamaicans for justice. The people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, the people demand. Right to life and security.
It is Monday, it is June 23, and you are joining us for Let's Talk Justice on Nationwide 90 FM. My name is Jade Williams. I am the Policy Research and Advocacy Manager at Jamaicans for Justice. Thank you so much for joining us this week. All right, so today we are going to be talking about an interesting but intricate topic. We'll be discussing cybercrimes, understanding the Cybercrimes Act, and we'll be discussing a few specific incidents or kinds of incidents and how we can respond to that here in Jamaica. To have this discussion, we'll be joined by Mr. John Clark, who is an attorney at law and is the chairman of the board at Jamaicans for Justice. We'll also be joined in studio by Mr. Chukwemeka Cameron, who is an attorney at law and is the founder of Design Privacy. But before we get into that, we will do our housekeeping. So we have our right of the day for today and our trivia question for today. Our right of the day comes straight from our constitution this time, from our charter section 13.3J, which speaks to our right to privacy, or what we call our right to privacy here in Jamaica, right? So all Jamaicans have the right to protection from search of the person and property, the right for the respect and protection of their private family life and privacy of the home, as well as the protection of privacy of other property and communications. And that little communications part there is going to be a major part of our discussion for today. Our trivia question for today is an easy one, so I hope that none of our YouTube listeners get this one, giving our other listeners a chance to respond. But in what year did Jamaica's Cybercrimes Act come into force? What year did Jamaica's Cybercrime Act come into force? So you can respond by sending a message on WhatsApp at 876-239-8573. You can respond to our chat on YouTube or to our Instagram pages at JA4Justice on Instagram. So speaking to cybercrimes, we see that Jamaica has started to extend its reach here, not only as it relates to cyber technology, but as it relates to cybercrimes. So these kinds of not so sophisticated attacks that we would have seen before are no longer. We're seeing increasingly sophisticated, scary attacks against businesses, government systems, etc. But what we're also seeing is an increased number of cyber incidents between individuals. And at Jamaicans for Justice, we've seen quite a few of those. We've spoken to at least one kind, the unauthorized disclosure of HIV status through electronic means. But several other issues have arisen between citizens and other citizens related to what we would consider to be cyber crimes. And one of these concerning trends is the threats online, cyber stalking, and the non-consensual sharing of intimate images, sometimes referred to as revenge porn. And these acts are frequently tied with personal relationships that have gone sour, or where the digital content is generally weaponized to shame, control, or retaliate against a person. Now, victims of these kinds of crimes can suffer serious emotional distress. We see reputational harm. We see physical danger as a result of these sharings. So we're going to be discussing what our Cybercrimes Act protects us from, and we're also going to talk about a little bit about the gaps. I don't know if Mr. Clark is with us. As yet, he's not. One of the things we will discuss with Mr. Clark, not directly related to cybercrimes though, is that incident that took place about a week ago with Alando Gray was reported in the Jamaica Gleno. But to discuss that sharing of private information, the person's picture, and how that would have affected their lives going forward. So we'll discuss that a little bit when Mr. Clark joins us. Joining us in studio, though, is Mr. Chukwemeka Cameron, attorney at law and founder of Design Privacy. I think you need to grab your monitor for me. It's right there behind your screen. Yes.
That's right. Monitored up.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
All right. So I think
I don't do good with questions first. So I'm going to jump in, if you don't mind,
please,
on one of your opening salvos, because it's at the top of the show. You referred our Constitution and you referred our right to privacy. As is set out in our Charter of Rights, we do need to acknowledge, because this is often overlooked, that coming out of the Julian Robinson and Attorney General case, our Constitutional Court declared and extended what we understand to be our privacy rights. They declared that all Jamaican citizens have a right to informational privacy. And the impact of that is that Jamaican citizens now own their personal data. And no one can use our personal data without our consent. If it is you are going to use our personal data, you have to follow the data processing standards set out in the Data Protection Act. It is equally, if not equally effective as the Cybercrimes Act, because it has criminalized even failing to have systems in place to ensure that you don't use personal data, like the image of that gentleman.
yes.
So I just wanted to start there, please.
No, thank you so much, and I appreciate that clarity, because I think when we look at the right as it's articulated in the Constitution, it feels very limiting in terms of what it is protecting, right? So it's good for us and the listeners to get the idea that it is much more extensive, having seen that judgment, than we would have originally thought.
Yes, please.
All right.
Ready for the question.
All right. So I think for our listeners, when we are trying to differentiate, how do we firstly differentiate between those cyber issues that are institutional and those that are citizen to citizen? Is that clear in the framework that we have?
Yes.
Elaborate for me.
So, and again, I'm going to defer to the attorney, Mr. Clark. Yes, I'm a practicing attorney with experience, but I focus more on data protection. But to answer your question, so you would be very familiar with the case that an attorney brought. I don't remember the name of the attorney, against CVM and TVJ, when they refused to broadcast some sponsored programming promoting his lifestyle, or I don't know if that's exactly it, but
yes,
Maurice Tomlinson, right. And although he was unsuccessful, the court declared that all citizens all businesses, all legal entities have a responsibility to respect an individual's constitutional right, and the individual can now sue an legal entity for breach of their constitutional right. What does that mean? Prior to that decision, you are only protected from abuse or infringement of your constitutional right by the state. That decision extended your protection to any other business or any other legal entity. So that is in the context of your question, individual to individual as opposed to individual to state. Can you enforce a constitutional right against an individual? I don't think it has extended that far. And that is where you have to rely on legislation now, either the Cybercrimes Act or the Data Protection Act.
Thank you so much for that. I think we have been joined by Mr. Clark, no? Mr. Clark, thank you so much for joining us. Not hearing. Oh, it seems we've lost him. So as soon as he came, he was gone. All right. So thank you for that, Mr. Cameron. So I wanted to ask then, when we look at the Cybercrimes Act, and we see the act talking about something like unauthorized access to a device, that's an offense. Does that mean, for example, if I have my personal cell phone and my partner tries to access that cell phone without my consent, does that fall into that unauthorized access? Or are we talking about something completely different?
You're going very hard with that question.
Yes.
So the starting position for me would be yes.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike the Data Protection Act that has limited the protection or created liabilities around commercial processing of personal data, and they have specifically excluded domestic processing.
Mm-hmm.
So you couldn't charge your husband or your wife or make a complaint against your husband or wife under the Data Protection Act if they were to use your information, because that's for domestic purpose.
Right. Mm-hmm.
However, I don't recall seeing any type of limitation in the Cybercrimes Act. What it contemplates that that you own your digital data as well, and you alone. It's the same concept.
Mm-hmm.
You have singular dominion, or you alone can determine who gets to access your personal information or your digital data. So yes, an individual, be it your partner or not, who without your authority or consent accesses your information, but I think the legislation speaks more than just access.
Mm-hmm.
There must be some type of modification, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I believe there is access. There's also modification. There's also transfer. The movement of the data.
Yeah.
I think we're rejoined by Mr. Clark now. Mr. Clark, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for your invite, and it was a pleasure listening to my colleague and the expert in this area, Mr. Cameron.
Yes. So we're right up on the break. So what I'm gonna ask you to do, Mr. Clark, is stay with us. We're gonna take the break, but when we come back, we had promised the listeners that we would give them a little bit of information about that Alando Gray matter and how that intersects with our privacy rights and our rights as citizens. So I'm gonna ask you to speak on that when we come back from the break.
Tune in to Cliff Views Online from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. for the annual Realign Business and Investment Conference 2025 at the Jamaica Pegasus on Wednesday, June 25. Join us for the Realign Business and Investment Conference featuring keynote speaker, Ambassador Audrey Marks, Ambassador Janet Alyssa, and visionary investor David Mullings. This event focuses on investments and partnerships, powering economic prosperity, engaging global Africa. Don't miss this opportunity to connect, invest, and grow. Be part of the movement. Realign your future today. So tune in to Cliff Views Online, June 25 from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. It's the annual Realign Business and Investment Conference 2025 at the Jamaica Pegasus. Catch the live stream on our YouTube channel at Nationwide 90 FM Live 2. All this and more only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media. This broadcast is brought to you by Entrepreneurial Partners Limited.
Tune in to Nationwide 90 FM with Pepita and Honey Bee from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. as we broadcast live from Megamart Waterloo, Friday, June 27. Pepita and Honey Bee plus Megamart equals Mega Vibes. Join us at Megamart Waterloo for all the month-end specials, excitement, entertainment, and more. Pepita and Honeybee are doing it mega with Megamart. Don't miss the end-of-month mega specials, June edition. Come be a part of the mega broadcast with Pepita and Honeybee. Friday, June 27, 2025 from 3 to 5 p.m. at Megamart Waterloo. Megamart, best value by far. This broadcast is brought to you by Megamart.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We've been discussing understanding cybercrimes. We are joined by Mr. Chukwemeka Cameron and Mr. John Clark, both attorneys at law. Before the break, Mr. Clark, I wanted you to give our listeners just your perspective on the Alando Gray incident, and just a refresher for those who aren't aware. That was a report that was in the Gleaner, I believe a week ago, involving a young man whose image was used as a Wanted Wednesday poster by the JCF. It turned out to be a case of mistaken identity. And then there was some length of time before that was corrected and resolved. So Mr. Clark, just your perspective on that incident.
Well, let me first start by indicating that Mr. Gray, who image was published on the JCF's Wanted Wednesday platform, essentially, was, as a person was wanted for murder. Mr. Gray turned himself into the police. After turning himself into the police, he indicated that the area where they indicated the murder took place was an area that he did not frequent at all. And after the investigation took place for more than 5 days, it was determined that Mr. Gray was wrongly taken into custody because it was another Alando Gray who the police want. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that is striking apparently from this entire interaction is how did this mistake happen in the first place, mm-hmm. who will be held accountable for this mistake, and whether or not sufficient steps were taken to identify what went wrong within the JCF internal system, and ultimately whether or not this scenario can occur to another citizen of this country. And those are issues that I hope that the JCF will give some serious thought to having public answers to, especially as relates to the issue, one of the concerning issue that the Gray family believes that this passport size picture, which was not given to anybody else, was apparently accessed by members of the state organs, mm-hmm. and was able to be deployed by the Jamaican Constabulary Force in their Wanted Wednesday publication. And apparently the family is suffering a severe ordeal from this entire incident. The mother and Mr. Gray and other family members are concerned about what implication this may have for him moving forward, despite the apology that the JCF published to the media, mm-hmm. but which apparently they haven't reportedly delivered personally to Mr. Gray, who I may add was personally taken into custody, and the relevant high command officers from the JCF formed the view that the publication in the press would have been sufficient and that there was no need, I understand, to speak to Mr. Gray personally in relation to the mistake that took place, nor to apologize to him personally for what happened.
If I may, well, to avoid a conflict of interest or even to just declare my hand, Jamaica Constabulary Force has recently engaged Design Privacy, my data protection consulting firm, mm-hmm. to assess those fundamental issues, because as we can see, they have been very aggressive in rolling out technologies and seeking to bring down the crime rate. So there's a lot of work to be done in no uncertain terms. Mm-hmm. But what I'm pleased about, even only being at the beginning of the engagement, if we were to go back to the same situation with the disclosure, how they treated the diaries when they're moving their offices, right. Mm-hmm. Is there accountability and transparency, and now they are putting steps in place to address it. So yes, that's a clear infringement under the Data Protection Act, because one of the standards that data controllers must comply with is ensuring that the information that you're processing is accurate.
Right.
And more so when it comes to sensitive personal data. When you look at and we're no longer talking about the risk, because very often you hear me speaking about the risk to the data subject. This is what we are speaking about when we speak about the risk to the data subject. The wrong person being put all across, and not only local media, being identified as a man wanted for murder. This is a harm and the risk we speak about to individuals. So it does have far-reaching consequences. The JSF in past has demonstrated that they are prepared to understand and own their mistakes. And as I've indicated, I've recently retained our services to address these fundamental issues.
Thank you for that, Mr. Cameron. So I have to ask Mr. Clark, considering all that Mr. Gray would have gone through and our discussion that we're having here about, privacy rights and the legislation that exists, does Mr. Gray have a cause of action against the state having had this issue come up?
Well, to be quite honest, I think I cannot say off the bat whether or not he has a cause of action. He will have to examine that with his lawyers in relation to what are the specific facts of his case. But what is important, nonetheless, to note moving forward is that it is admirable, and I don't think I had indicated that as much at that to the offset. How the JSF, even though a mistake was made, mistakes can be made in every system. What is admirable in any event is how the JCF had made that publication essentially apologizing for, that's how I interpreted, apologizing for what took place. And why I said it's admirable, because I cannot recall personally any other time I'd seen that type of approach from the JCF and that's a welcome step in a new direction from a transformed constabulary force. I recall, for example, in the Michael Gill incident when Mr. Gill was beaten by members of the security forces. I do not recall, even in that scenario, even after the matter was taken to the International Human Rights Commission, that there was an apology directly from the JCF or any security forces for the role that they play in that incident. So we are a modern society where we're learning from our mistakes, and it's something that is noteworthy in any event from this interaction. And possibly, if Mr. Gray and this matter very well go to court, something that a judge may very well take into consideration, especially if matter reaches for the stage for aggravated damages or discussion in that respect, in terms of ensuring that the state would have acknowledged that something went wrong and ultimately taking steps to correct it.
Right.
On the cause of action part, outside of this situation, because I've declared my hand.
Yes, sure.
But where a citizen is a subject of inaccurate processing of personal data, and he can prove damages, that under the Data Protection Act, you can go to court and you have a cause of action because a data processing standard was breached, and as a result of that breach, you have suffered damages that you can prove. It's not just a fact of a breach of a data processing standard, but the fact that you have also suffered damages.
I thank you for that. So I get you. So there must be some loss, right?
Correct. That you can prove.
That you can prove. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Cameron. So I do want to switch gears a little, Mr. Clark, because I know you're not with us for very long. And I wanted to discuss another issue that we've seen coming up a lot, where it relates to gender-based and domestic violence, and that is the unauthorized sharing of intimate images and so on, colloquially called revenge porn, and how we can respond to that here in Jamaica. I know you have a matter that you were on that was able to get some redress for that client. So if you could give us a bit about that case and, what exists to respond to those issues.
Yes. So in that particular case, I don't know, you're calling to the case that person said the revenge porn case, that case?
Yes, that case.
Yes, in that particular case, the young lady was in a relationship was in a relationship with her partner, and ultimately, one afternoon after the relationship ended, she would have seen her images in the being forwarded to her on her WhatsApp on a WhatsApp phone in terms of videos with the most intimate interactions between her and that gentleman. And those videos, in fact, found themselves on porn website with vivid descriptions being made of her name, of her occupation, and circumstances to which persons can easily identify precisely who she is, including linking it directly to her social media handles. So the young lady had contacted the gentleman and asked for his assistance in trying to identify how did this breach take place, and asked him to carry his phone, for example, to the police for them to ascertain what happened. Because the gentleman indicated he doesn't know how it take place, and in those circumstances, ultimately he declined to. He followed her to the police station, but he declined to have his phone examined, and just indicated that he just unsure what happened, but he had no role to play, but the images just got out there. And in light of that, she decided that she wanted to essentially bring a court action against him to prevent any further publication, and have the court make an order him to not ensure that there's no further publication, and compensate her for the damages that she had suffered in relation to her images being out there in the public. She brought action to court, ultimately received the injunction which would prevent him from doing any further publication, and also received some damages in relation to the injuries that she had suffered from her images being posted in the media.
While I hear how it ended, I am concerned with the failure of the state to protect its citizen and the dignity and autonomy of the individual, because the same Cybercrimes Act that we speak of empowers the state to apply for warrant under the Cybercrimes Act, and empowers the state to apply for something akin to compelling the individual to produce the phone when there is a reasonable suspicion of a crime being committed. In these circumstances, where the assumption is they are aware that these pictures or images were taken by this phone, and it was only on this phone, and then you find the images somewhere else, that is a reasonable suspicion. And the state is empowered to apply for a warrant under the Cybercrimes Act and other relief under the Cybercrimes Act. I guess this is brand new, so there's a big disjoint between what you can do and what you cannot do. They're either extremely extreme or fail to act any at all.
Right.
So over time, I hope we will close the gap.
Right.
But and to follow up with what you just said, Mr. Cameron, in this particular case, the victim, who is a member of the legal profession, in fact, went to the police and members of the prosecution I haven't read that same Cybercrime Act, to ask them to take steps pursuant to that relevant act. And in fact, what had taken place was that the gentleman who was on a visit to Jamaica, he, whilst they were diddling and trying to determine what to do and how to do it, he left the island, and when he left, they indicated that there's nothing much they can do at this stage unless she can present proof essentially that he was the one who did the publication.
No, how both the Data Protection Act is constructed and the Cybercrimes Act, it is contemplated and understood. You, the individual, can't prove it. So they are empowered. So from a data protection perspective, once there's that publication, you are responsible because you failed to put a system in place to prevent the publication. And from the Cybercrimes Act, you are the state is empowered to conduct the relevant investigations to determine whether or not you are guilty of an offense or not.
All right, so we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to ask you to stay with us for another 5 minutes or so, Mr. Clark, so we can wrap up this discussion.
Thank you very much.
At the Jamaica Customs Agency, we care for our employees, customers, stakeholders, citizens, and our country. Customs cares. The temperature by the Jamaica Customs Agency is
29 degrees Celsius in Kingston, 27 degrees Celsius in Montego Bay.
Taboo topics,
Voyagings after dark,
riveting discussions,
celebrity news and interviews,
topics that are shunned by society,
and everything else in between.
Voyagings After Dark with Kareem Voyagings each and every Wednesday, 8 to 11 p.m.
Voyagings After Dark.
No topic is too taboo or hard to discuss. Come get your mind blown and your curiosity explored.
Voyagings After Dark.
The Race to 32. Nationwide 90 FM's coverage of the 2025 general elections. Coming soon.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We've been discussing understanding cybercrimes, and we're joined by Mr. Chukwemeka Cameron and Mr. John Clark, both attorneys at law. Mr. Clark, before the break, we were discussing the matter of revenge porn and how we have seen that addressed so far in our jurisdiction. And I think we've uncovered a few challenges in terms of how the enforcement of the legislation has been implemented. I just wanted to find from you if you've encountered any other challenges with addressing these kinds of issues, and what advice would you have for those citizens who are experiencing any issue related to this, revenge porn or having their private information shared when it should not have been?
Well, one of the key things and it's always a pleasure speaking with you and Mr. Cameron. One of the key thing I've learned from this interaction, which I perhaps had not placed sufficient emphasis on before, was the extent to which the relevant state organs had failed in their own role in terms of assisting that particular complainant who, at its core, when she started the process, wanted the matter to be dealt with in the criminal court and wanted the police officers to take action and to compel the relevant person to give up his device. And when it was and in fact, she, an attorney, was advised that it's his discretion whether he gives it up, yes or no. And then he indicated that he was leaving the island. And then they said, oh, well, there's not the weekend about it. And he left the island with the phone. And then that was it. So the concern I have, and I'm happy that Mr. Cameron seemingly has certain interaction and hopefully hears within the JCF. I hope that they'll re-examine that particular process to ensure that the relevant, if anybody else faces the same situation and they make a report to the relevant state organs, that the officers will be aware of the powers under the Act and will be able to provide the assistance that is necessary. But I think there was a caveat that the camera had highlighted earlier, which is that the relevant law is also new. And so that may have caused the issue around her time when that incident occurred was closer to the time that the legislation was just in effect. As the legislation become into wider usage and knowledge, one hopes that sufficient protocols will be placed to avoid persons faced with similar situation from having to engage with civil court when they would have preferred that the criminal court deal with the matter. But in any event, persons who are listening who may be in a similar boat, you have heard what Mr. Cameron indicated that the police do have certain powers, so you can make the request that they do certain things, and if that fail, you can engage the appropriate legal officers who may very well be able to, having listened to this program or examined relevant legislation, be able to provide you with advice in relation to how you can navigate the quagmire of our law.
Thank you, Mr. Clark.
I'm going to invite an institution or entity like a Jamaicans for Justice and especially someone like you, Mr. Clark, to leverage the right that all citizens have to a private prosecution. We are not left without recourse or redress. And we do want to, how we develop our jurisprudence, how we develop those protocols that we see wanting to be implemented, is by taking that type of bold initiative. And we have a right to private prosecution. You would have heard Indicom back in the day basing all their investigations on the right of a private prosecution. Well, we are actually citizens. We are the ones who enjoy that right of private prosecution. So I'm going to challenge you, Sir Clark, and your entity, not to leave it on the state alone. Our legislative framework has empowered us to protect ourselves. So let us take it into our own hands as well.
All right, thank you so much for that, Mr. Cameron. Mr. Clark, thank you for joining us. I know you had limited time, so if you need to leave us now, I can understand, and I appreciate you joining us.
Did you take up the challenge, Sir Clark? You're taking up the challenge?
I will definitely be having further words with the board, but it's just something that's worthy of exploration.
Lovely.
Because and also what is worthy of further discussion is that we perhaps need to have a forum and me talk to you and Mr. Cameron and relevant JSF officers to examine how it is that these cybercrimes are actually prosecuted, or whether or not there's more to be learned. Even use this as a test case, as in that particular case, from how that case was dealt with. Because one of the things that struck me the most from this interaction is the extent to which the relevant tools available to the state was utilized in that particular case. And the question that arises in my mind is, to what extent can further education, even internally and externally, ensure that this doesn't occur again for other persons?
Thank you so much.
And thank you for the work that you have always been doing in this area. It's an area that touches and concerns so many citizens, Mr. Cameron, because each of us have a data profile. All of us, a lot of citizens, if you know, even the citizens in the most volatile communities have access to a phone. And in those circumstances, the work that you do in this field is unheralded and absolutely necessary. We look forward to the benefit that the country will gain from your work in this area.
Thank you very much for your kind words, sir.
Yes, thank you. All
right. So, Mr. Cameron, I know you have actually seen a few prosecutions initiated, maybe completed, under the Cybercrimes Act. What was the nature of those, if you can share, and what was that process like?
So I actually consulted on the first prosecution under the Cybercrimes Act, and that was a situation of revenge porn as well. And once you're able to establish the fact of the publication, and because we readily accept the concept, well, the courts readily accept that when we're speaking about revenge porn, and when we say revenge porn, the publication of naked images of an individual, the court readily accepts that as being identified or targeted in the legislation. The prosecution was able to obtain a successful prosecution under the legislation.
So I think one of my first questions would be, if I am the victim in this case, what do I need to be bringing to report? Just the fact that I am a victim and showing the evidence that this thing has been published, and who I suspect? What's the process? Will there be an examination of the device? Will this take as long as, for example, when we have to send things to ballistics or when we have to send things to, forensics? Like, what is the process here?
So, thank you for that very important question. It raises a bigger question. I'm going to come back to your specific questions. I told you upfront I'm not good with questions. It raises a bigger issue and the role that our investigative bodies play and investigative powers that all our investigative commissions have. Because very often you hear our independent commissions saying that we want the power to prosecute, No, and I'm speaking to all the commissions across the board. If you have a power of investigation, use it. Because in the instant, now to your specific question, this victim doesn't have that power of investigation.
Yeah, yes.
He was a victim of it, and he can only show you, see, this is me, and this is a publication. It's not expected that a victim could come to the table with anything more than that. It's then left up to the state, the relevant state organ or agency, to use the tools that have been provided by legislation to conduct the appropriate investigation and then provide that to the prosecution to put forward the case. Although the investigation does form part of the prosecution, but to gather the requisite evidence and hand it over to the prosecution. I have come across similar type complaints where it's not necessarily to treat with revenge porn, but it does fall under the definitions that has been set out in Section 9 of the legislation that speaks to once there's any threatening or obscene or menacing data that used to harass or cause harm. I've noticed that we do want to have that type of public discourse with the relevant state agencies because there has been a very narrow interpretation of that. And and in that context, they are leaving citizens of Jamaica exposed. In the absence of conversation as well, I'm always of the view that our constitution, our charter of rights, empowers the citizen. And it's because of the cost of litigation, it is left to entities like Jamaicans for Justice to explore these things. Because when you have a legislation that provides protection for the Jamaican citizen, but the state agency is responsible for interpreting that legislation, say, no, it don't fit under that. This is where you bring the matter before a constitutional court, ask for an interpretation and a mandamus. When I say mandamus, asking the constitutional court to compel the requisite state agency to act in accordance with their responsibilities. So we do want to try that collaborative approach and build consensus as understanding because it is brand new.
Yes. Yes, I have to agree with you. I think one of the challenges we've also had at JFJ in just attempting to seek redress for persons is that there is not that uniformed understanding, particularly even of that Section 9, which is what we've most engaged with at JFJ, because it speaks to obscene, threatening, menacing. And for example, we would have had a client who has had a video posted about them online, and the video, while it does have some defamatory comments, some of the comments are threatening but not overtly threatening, if you know what I mean. It's kind of like the inciting of a threat or the inciting of violence. And, the conclusion of the complaint was that, this is a matter for defamation. It's not necessarily a matter for cybercrimes. And so we're not going to pursue it in that way. And that was challenging for us because looking at the data ourselves, we were able to see it being threatening and falling within that section. But we're going to take the break and then we're going to just discuss after we come back just a little bit more about how we use that now and where we can go from here.
It's Monday, get over your blues. Or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The E-Zone is here for you. With the Stinger Honeybee
And Karim Boyatings
from 3 to 5 p.m. on Nationwide 90 FM.
We've got your entertainment news.
Then we want to hear your views. Why you said?
Jump in the mix.
Or the hot seat.
Don't miss our brain busters.
Or the crazy giveaways.
Let's talk fashion.
Send us your outfit of the day. Ooh, cutesy. Very demure.
Are you looking for love?
Come on one of our blind dates. Send your request to ezoneblindates@gmail.com. That's ezoneblindates@gmail.com.
And stay tuned for your confessions.
These are my confessions.
Share them with us at ezoneconfessions@yahoo.com. I mean, is this planet Earth?
Is it?
I don't know. Let me check. Either way, it's got a buzz.
And a bugger thing.
Ow! Ow!
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We've been discussing understanding cybercrimes. We are currently joined by Mr. Chukwemeka Cameron, attorney at law and founder of Design Privacy. So before the break, we were discussing, the prosecution under the Cybercrimes Act and how some of that interpretation have left some citizens protected, some citizens exposed. So if I am a CTOC officer or an officer in the cybercrimes unit or a prosecutor in the cybercrimes unit at the DPP, and I'm listening to this program now, what would be your advice to me in my application of this legislation for the Jamaican citizen?
Your question won't get me in trouble.
I know we've discussed, a little bit about, a need for expanding certain areas of application. So maybe we can speak from that perspective.
So from what we see happening in other jurisdictions with new legislation, there is really a consultative process where regulatory bodies invite members of the public and different stakeholders to get their input. Because what may be necessary, a practical solution, is a regulation to support the legislation that identifies exactly what is offensive. Because very often it's left to the interpretation of one police officer or left to the interpretation of one member of the DPP. And their view, while it may very well be researched or not, may not be the right conclusion. Given the fact that we now live in this information age and we're aggressively undergoing digital transformation, these laws really are set out to protect the modern day citizen in this modern day world that we live in. So to my mind, it does demand some sort of public consultation so the legislation can be attuned to our local experience and our culture. Because even if it were to be well researched under what happens in other countries, our culture has specific nuances that we do want to appreciate. So my thing is, under this new transformative and approach and this whole digital transformation as well, let us create this collaborative approach, include members of the stakeholder, and let that be a part of how we create our legislation and write our legislation on a high level. There's no question as to whether there was very extensive public consultation when it spoke about the passage of the Cybercrimes Act and even recently amendment of the Cybercrimes Act. But we want it to be more on a community level and an ongoing conversation. In addition to that, we want to see training developed for the prosecution. We want training developed for our judges, because they ultimately are going to be the final arbiters as well.
Right. As you're talking and, speaking to a continuous conversation, I'm thinking about how, as we go through technological changes, how rapid that has been. Just 2 years ago, we didn't have like generative AI as we do now. As a normal citizen, trying to navigate these technologies and this space and protect your privacy, what kind of advice can you give us as an individual? Is there things we can do to mitigate, the unauthorized sharing of our data from our end?
So the first thing I want us to do is, and consistent with what your organization does, acknowledge and understand that we have rights.
Yes.
That's a fundamental thing. I'm not going to tell anybody to go and read the legislation or read the Constitution, but you first need to value yourself and acknowledge that you have rights. And even if you can't articulate what that right is, once you feel oppressed, once you feel constrained, you then need to act on that. So that's at a very, 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 very basic level. Because Jamaica has a lot of commissions and a lot of institutions,
Yes.
The Jamaicans for Justice has played its role in ensuring that that those institutions are called for and in response to the noise that you have made. But we are, from a institutional point of view, pretty mature. So you have an Office of the Information Commissioner. You don't need a lawyer. Pick up the phone, make a complaint or submit an email. You have a Public Defender's Office. Pick up the phone, send an email. You have a Indicom. You have a lot of independent agencies that if one agency is not the right place, they'll send you to the other one. But it all starts with empowering the individual who is subject, because what we see playing out in the United States and part of the mechanism, what we do not want is for our citizens to feel helpless.
Yes.
As if there is no recourse. And that is why I start with understand that we have rights, understand that we have value. Once you understand that, you would then say, no, this is not right. I don't know what to do about it. But that's when you listen to shows like this and you start call somebody, and they should be able to put you in the right direction.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Cameron. So we've had, I think, a pretty extensive and fruitful discussion on, cybercrimes, our privacy rights, how we respond to certain breaches where those privacy rights are concerned. And I appreciate your contribution to the show. Thank you
pleasure.
for joining us. All right, so we're going to do a bit of wrapping up housekeeping. We do have a winner for our trivia question this week. And our trivia question was, in what year was the Cybercrimes Act put into force or passed? I believe it was put into force. The response was 2015. The correct answer is 2015. The person who won the trivia is Annie Smith. So if you are interested in your prize, you can respond 2397583. If you are not interested in your prize,
let me know if you're not interested.
Well, if we don't hear from you, our next winner on the list is Rick NYCJM. So you can respond via WhatsApp to 2397583. All right. So in wrapping up now, I just wanted to share with you, listeners, some of the things we've been talking about here. As we've been discussing the Cybercrimes Act, we said there were some definitions in it that were important. One of them was damage, right? And damage is a word that is used throughout, because you usually have to show damage in order to have a cause of action here. And the damage that the Act contemplates is economic loss, that it modifies or impairs or potentially modifies or impairs the medical examination, diagnosis, treatment, or care of one or more persons, that it causes or threatens physical injury or death to a person, it threatens public health or public safety, or that it threatens physical damage to a computer. And the Act does have some protected computers as well that would apply to, right? But when we talk about damage now, the economic loss, so the sharing of these images, these publications, cause you to lose your job or cause you to be unable to go out. As we spoke to Mr. Gray's matter, you know, I'm not adjudicating his matter now, just using it as an example. But we would have heard in the report that he started to avoid going out because the photo was still up on social media, and he was concerned that if he was to be seen on the street walking around like a free man, he would be arrested again, or he would be further persecuted because it was indicating that he was still a wanted man, right? So that could have been a cause for economic loss. He would have not been able to go to work and not been able to earn in that time period, right? We see causes threat or threatens physical injury or death to any person. As Jamaicans for Justice has been working in domestic and gender-based violence, and that was one of the reasons we brought up this topic, is that we've seen increasingly threats of violence come through electronic means. And I think that persons take that approach because they feel as though they are less likely to experience any negative repercussions if they use that medium. So we wanted the listeners to be aware that there is redress available. And we've heard some of the challenges where it is that you've made a complaint to a police station, for example, and it was related to the Cybercrimes Act, and you feel as though the response was not as favorable as it should have been. That is something that you can speak to JFJ about. You know, we do state accountability. And so if it is an instance where you feel as though the state did not respond in the way that was appropriate, it's something we want to know, and it's something that we want to push to ensure that the Act is used in the way that it is expected to be used. And the Act has good fines, right? And some of these would have been updated in the most recent amendments after the review last year. So there is a lot to protect us, and it is for us as citizens to know what those things are and to engage with them. So, you know, you can always reach out to JFJ if you don't know.
And it can leave out the Office of the Public Defender.
Most certainly. Most certainly. Use up your state agencies and make your reports where you are able. So thank you all for listening. Thank you for joining us this week. My name is Jade Williams. I am the Policy Research and Advocacy Manager at Jamaicans for Justice. And I was joined by Mr. Cameron in studio. So we'll see you next week on Let's Start Justice. Thanks again.
Jamaicans for Justice, the people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Out of many we are one in a Jamaica. Make it a better place for the boys and girls. Created equal by the creator. For equal rights and opportunities. No to unlawful detention and police brutalization. Class, gender, race or religion. We not tolerate discrimination.
To join the fight against injustice, contact us at 755-4524 or JamaicansForJustice.org.
The people's champion.
Attention all data protection enthusiasts. Tune in to Nationwide 90 FM every Tuesday at 8:20 a.m. and Thursday at 8:25 a.m. for a new program, Data Protection Matters. Starting June 4, 2024, join us as we delve into crucial topics